And welcome in to another episode of the Q Crew here
Q crew.
on the Tell Me More podcast. And every time we get Brandon on, I need to find the clip. After this is over, I'm just going to get the clip of you doing the Q Crew, and I'm going to start putting it on the beginning of every podcast, even when you aren't able to make it. Brandon McNasty Pickens here again to talk with me about a subject that we've wanted to do for a long time. This one will be a little bit of a deep dive on Dave Chappelle's recent specials, particularly what he's done since signing a mega deal with Netflix, and then, more importantly, the one that made sure that we knew we needed to do this as soon as we could, instead of just kind of being something that was in the air and we were just kind of working towards. He released a special called 846. The title is referencing the amount of time that Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin had his knee pressed into George Floyd's neck. So, before we can discuss what, Chappelle talks about during this special, we have to talk about this event and the conversations that this country has been having over the last few weeks. And, just as the initial, explanation, this was basically a public lynching caught on film. It's not unlike what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Gardner, Philando Castile, and the ever-growing list of snuff films that we've had roll across our social media feeds over the last decade. But that list is that much longer when we talk about Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice.
They need to arrest them bastards. Sorry to interrupt. They need to arrest them bastards. That's unconscionable.
At this point, it's a countless number of names of black people that have been murdered in the streets by the people who are supposedly meant to protect them, and without a camera phone nearby to capture it, so many of these names we wouldn't even hear of. Those names go back centuries, and the names that we wouldn't even know even a decade ago, before technology turned into a tool giving every citizen the power to capture and distribute the truth. And it's crazy because even with those videos, that truth was obscured. It was obscured by white people who found any opportunity to look away. But this time America couldn't look away. We all sat in our homes during this pandemic, and we didn't have anywhere else to look. Sadly, in order for white people to stop looking for excuses, we needed to see the tethered version of Colin Kaepernick's protesting of police brutality 4 years ago when he kneeled during the national anthem before NFL games. The haunting symbolism that connects those two images helped finally crush the power of a white quarterback to try to obscure the protest by talking about how he felt about the flag and using that flag as a blindfold to not see what was in front of him.
Soul, bruh. I've been arguing that Drew is the GOAT for fucking years. That nigga hurt my feelings, G. Like, straight up.
And you look at that. You look at the change we've seen in 4 years, because that argument was pretty much word for word what he said 4 years ago, and he got it to applause by such a large portion of Americans. And now we're to a point where I think I knew we would see the political activism from NBA players. I think it is so surprising to me to see the NFL players all step out and make that push, because it is an equally, in terms of the demographics of the NFL, equally a black majority league living in a white society. And with their money on the line, there were not a lot of names that kneeled with Colin Kaepernick. There were a lot of people who right now are trying to hold their bosses accountable that did not kneel down with Colin Kaepernick 4 years ago. They have seen the change, not just in the growing number of videos that we've had to watch over the last 4 years, but also seeing the education of white people, not much different than myself, Brandon, we've had these conversations for a long time about I've spent the last decade basically deprogramming and trying to learn as much as I can, trying to make sure that instead of the conversations where a white person says something like all lives matter and you have to take the time out of your day to try to help this person that otherwise you've dealt with in common situations day after day and wouldn't expect them to say something as ignorant as that. I've tried my best over the last 4 years to be the person who jumps in and says what needs to be said to those people. Explain to them, do the education that white people need to do for other white people to get to where this society needs to get to.
A thing that I really, really appreciate about you and about the way that you're able to see and perceive these things is like I've been to your parents' place. We pulled up a gravel road. This fucking local school bus parked in the goddamn driveway. Like
usually a couple school buses.
Good, right. I would say it's just good old Kansas folks just doing Kansas shit. And when we have these conversations, you get it. And I have to have these conversations with people who literally lived and grown up and seen in our neighborhoods with their own eyes and still have to try to explain what should be, at least from where I'm sitting, it should be fucking common sense. Like, Black Lives Matter, not because yours doesn't. We know that yours does. We need to talk about the black ones in particular right now because they've been getting run the fuck over consistently and continually. And the concept of like the Kaepernick protest, that was your peaceful protest. They fucking tried speaking on the terms and parameters given to us, using the platform that he was given. And what did he get for his efforts? Basically ran out of the league, becomes a pariah across the country, and everyone else who doesn't get that message is doomed to meet the same fate for the most part. There are very few people that made it out of that clean who were loud in the first place. And the simple fact that the argument is, oh, well, troops, this. I'm a veteran. My daddy a veteran. Granddaddy's a veteran on both sides. My mama's a veteran. Stepmama, stepdaddy, all veterans. We love that fucking flag. That flag has not done what it's supposed to for us. That's all. And part of the reason that we took that oath in the first place was to fight for American citizens' rights to tell the people running shit, hey, we don't like what you're doing. We ain't bombed out a whole fucking city. Ain't nobody set Wall Street on fire. If vengeance was the move, then this podcast would be a whole different tone. It's not what we're here for. And the fact that even asking to be able to eat at the same table creates animosity tells you where the headspace of the people fighting back is. Yeah. It shouldn't be scary to get pulled over for having a fucking taillight out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that also, leads to another point, which is it's crazy to think we kind of have to see the most extreme version of police corruption. A life has to be lost, and in this case, dozens, hundreds, thousands per year have to be lost, and we still need the one video, the one act that is impossible. Even somebody as ridiculous as Rush Limbaugh couldn't defend the actions of this police officer in this video because we've watched it for so long. Every video that seems like it is clear that what the officer did was not only, if we're talking about whether they should be suspended, fired, prosecuted for murder, we have seen it, and we've still seen people attempt
Walk
to
away
underplay
clean.
what happens in those
George
videos.
Zimmerman wasn't even a whole ass cop. This nigga out here signing Skittles bags and shit.
And
He sold the gun for $250,000. How do you get to kill a child, make $250,000, and still draw breath on this planet? Where does that make sense?
and those specific instances where you know that the people who continue to pitch in and all lives matter whenever they get the chance are the same ones who have turned George Zimmerman into somebody who has the ability to make money off of something that should have caused him to never live another free day in his life. And the fact that he never spent any time actually locked up, the fact that he is able to profit off this and be an icon for the far right, shows you it's either dishonesty or it's just flat out disgusting the way they view the world. And it's crazy because when you're talking with people who just haven't had the experiences, haven't done the reading to figure out what's going on with black people in this society, how they're being treated by the cops, how they're being treated by people when a black person walks into a white neighborhood. And Ahmaud Arbery is another example. That's not even police officers that are taking it upon themselves to be the judge, jury, and executioner for even when there are crimes involved. They're misdemeanors. Then we find out they're not even crimes being committed.
Assuming that he did exactly what they thought he was doing, that is still not a thing that is worth a person's life. If he gets arrested, gets arraigned, goes to trial, all that jazz, what you got? Stealing from a construction site? Maybe a 5-year sentence. There was he's not armed, so there's nobody in danger. He's not actively robbing something. He's burgling a place. If he were doing exactly what they said he did and not doing exactly what any random person who lives in a neighborhood when a new building is being built, looking at the place and then continuing on his fucking job. They stalked that man. That's, again, like you said, that is a straight up lynching. That's what we saw is another fucking snuff thing. And you see it every day. There's a new one every day. I think in the last, week, they found 6 black people hanging around this country, and they have ruled every single one of those a suicide. I forget who said it, but they said it appropriately. Niggas hanging themselves out in public from trees makes about as much sense as Jews committing suicide via gas chamber. No, it's just that's not a fucking thing. It's not a fucking thing.
And it's those situations that make it where it is so important that we act now. And, earlier I was talking about, 4 years. That's the difference between what Drew Brees said working and it receiving the type of backlash where he apologizes within a day. It's so strange because we've been amazed by how fast, that changes come from the people who start with no idea of what's going on, or at least are very antagonistic to the truth being presented to them, and then now have started to, actually listen. But, the only reason we think that's fast is because you're comparing it to the slow 400-year roller coaster ride of perceived progress. And, it seems like the blink of an eye in comparison, but it's still far too slow because the number of people who are killed by cops, the number of people who, when you're talking about 20 people that it's been ruled a suicide, but anybody with a brain can tell you that's bullshit. That is something that has to be stopped today. It has to be stopped now. And we don't have 4 years to get the next, 20% of white people who don't get it to start to understand it. And
just imagine if Philando Castile was a white guy. That's a car carrying fucking the NRA would have been all up and down Minneapolis's asshole. They'd have ran all the checks. That man's little daughter would have never had to worry about a fucking single thing in the history of her life. But instead, since he's a black dude, the officer's fear of his life is now justified. Even though, and we all heard and saw this snuff film too, he said specifically what he was doing and how he was doing it. And as soon as he does it, after getting confirmation from the cop, he gets shot. And the last words out of his mouth were, "But you told me to." How does that make sense? How do those people not go straight to so the difference between first degree and second degree in murder, I believe, has something to do with premeditation or an intent, like you left the house to go murder a person. Mm-hmm. In a situation like that, where clearly your mind is made up by the time you got to the vehicle, because despite what they will tell you, ain't nobody trained to have their hand on their trigger at all times. This ain't the fucking Wild Wild West. It's a traffic stop. And also, any idiot that's ever done any kind of gun training whatsoever can see that there's a little girl in the back seat. You don't discharge a weapon into that vehicle. Simple as that. That alone should be enough. Is there a child in the back seat of the car? You don't discharge your weapon into that car. For why? Because do you want to shoot a kid? He did not care whether or not that little girl got shot. That was not a thing that he was worried about. And obviously, he either was not listening at all, which means that he wasn't doing his job, or he didn't care whether or not dude was actually reaching for his ID in the first place, which means he wasn't doing his fucking job. Either way, that is at the very least criminal negligence, and from what I can see, first degree murder. How does this man get to go home to his family?
And I also think one thing to bring up when we've watched kind of the slow process of officers involved in these police slayings be first just sit on their merry way. Then we see a video and eventually get suspended with pay. Then maybe if enough pressure has been applied, eventually fired. Maybe if we're lucky, they get charged, but eventually go free.
They don't get prosecuted. So the charge itself is just to shut people up for a little bit, because that's a thing. Because of the fact that we do a terrible job of teaching civics as a country, people assume when they go, "Oh, he got charged with murder," that must mean he's going to prison now. No, that means he's going to court now. And he's going to see a quote unquote jury of his peers, which is a thing that is a foreign fucking concept to a young black man trying to live his fucking life. Because, when's the last time you seen anything where the jury had more than 2 black people on it at one time? No matter where the case is being tried or what the trial is about, you could have a murder in the blackest part of fucking Atlanta, and all parties involved are black. And what do you see when you go look over at the jury? All old white folks.
You often see them move the trial to a different area and to make sure they get the white folks as well.
They know what they're looking for.
There is so many problems with the system, and I think that's probably the thing that is the worst part is we've only looked at the extremes. That's the only thing that has gotten through to white America. And the problem is, even when it doesn't end in a young black person being killed by the cops, the times that they have been beaten up by the cops, the times that they are charged with something where we have so many more black people charged with drug-related crimes, despite all of the statistics telling us that white people and black people in this country use those drugs at the same rate. The focus of the police attention that puts that pressure to have more interactions with black people than should happen, that also leads to where it doesn't matter about number of bad apples and the idea these are isolated incidents. One, the supposed good cops are covering for the bad cops, but two, there are more interactions that will lead to the potential of a white cop deciding, I'm scared because this is a black man in the car that says he has a gun legally, and then he reacts in a way that ends up ending a man's life because he's scared. They shouldn't have the number of interactions that
In the words of all of my favorite uncles, if you scared, ho, go to church. That's not the job for you. The fact that we can send these basically fucking kids off to war, fucking, I had kids in my basic training flight that were 17 years old. You know what I mean? Hey, you can prepare them and get them ready to go to war, and the amount of steps that you have to take there before you discharge a weapon on an enemy combatant on foreign soil are far and beyond what you drop the gun. It's a candy. Ba 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 ba. I mean, and it's not like this is some new narrative or some crazy thing that just popped up recently. Shit, that Fresh Prince episode where they have to go to court. Jazzy Jeff walks in with his hands up before he walks behind the stand. And they're like, "You can put your hands down." And he goes, "Yeah, so I can get 6 warning shots in the back." No, thank you. This ain't new. The cops are just the new age slave catchers, and the prison system is legit just chattel slavery. You can look that up fucking anywhere. That's not it. They're not even being secretive about it. It is clear as fucking day.
And talking about how long we've known this, we tie it back into Dave Chappelle and not just the conversation he has in 846, which we'll talk about in a minute, just because I think the power of the conversation he has and what is a special but is not stand-up comedy, in any way that I would classify it. But you go back to his stand-up comedy, you had told me you had thrown on some older stand-ups. You had to throw in Killing Them Softly for Julia to show her what's up. Julie needed to see that because that is some stuff that back in the day, Dave Chappelle is firing all cylinders, and there is still a moment, and I wish I would have wrote this down, his exact wording, but he's talking about how white people have just figured out that this is happening, that police end up killing black people in these situations, but they didn't know until it was in Newsweek.
They've been out here beating up Negroes like hotcakes.
That is 20 years ago. He says it as a statement of, now people are starting to see. 20 years later, we're still telling white people that this is happening. This isn't a figment of black people's imagination.
I saw a post of these old white ladies, like the late 80s, early 90s, and one of them had a sign that was like, "I cannot believe I still have to come out here and march for this shit." Like, she's like, "Bitch, I've been doing this since 1951. You motherfuckers ain't listening yet." And the fact that she still has the gumption to go fucking do it in the first place. I applaud you, Ethel or Myrtle or whoever you are. Love you. But it's past the point where you could reasonably say, "Oh, they just don't understand." No, they fucking understand. They fucking understand, and they are intentionally trying to keep other people from getting to it. That's the only reason that they try to weaponize and demonize a sentence like Black Lives Matter. That statement in and of itself should not be a problem for anyone. The issue is that it is combated with other phrases like all lives matter or blue lives matter. I'm not even going to get into that last one because holy fucking joke face. But obviously, and no, all lives don't matter. We've made that very, very clear. Tell that to them little kids rotting in them cages down there. You know what I'm saying? Like, tell that to the people that get fucked over and can't fucking afford insulin because capitalism. Like, all lives don't matter. If they did matter, we wouldn't have to have this conversation right now.
And I mean, I think that's another point, and I won't call out anybody specifically, but there is a ex-girlfriend of yours that had a very dumb person jump into one of their posts and was talking about the idea that basically we need to stop putting in the racial signifiers and headlines to describe these events, because the problem is just police brutality. And without even needing to explain to her the statistics to tell you, yeah, there's police brutality against everybody. Obviously, it is disproportionately affecting black people. But even past that, okay, take your time. That energy you spent telling people to get rid of the racial modifiers and headlines, maybe take that time to actually stop police brutality. And that's the biggest problem with the All Lives Matter comment, is if that is your response to police officers killing young black men in the streets on video, and still
Broad
1 in 100 can
daylight.
get convicted of it, if that's the best you can do is convict 1 of 100 police officers who commit murder with video evidence, then the problem of police brutality might be the problem. Let's fix it all together, because once you fix police brutality, then we don't have to worry about the fact that it is focused, it is predominantly affecting black people in this country. Let's fix that. And that's part of the issue right now, is making sure you're not just stopping this one off. It's not as important that you are just going to take down Derek Chauvin. It is that you are stopping those 3 people that are standing around him. You're stopping the type of police officers in Buffalo that when they crack a 70-year-old man's skull open, they lie on the police report, which is 90% of what the average person thinks happens in anything. Once they see that in the story, they think that's what happened. Turns out, not accurate.
Just quit. They were like, oh, well, he's going to get in trouble. Well, we quit. We're going to pick up our ball and go home. You didn't need to be a cop in the first place. You ain't here to protect no fucking body.
I believe in Atlanta right now, they have the police officers are basically going on strike, and the Atlanta mayor had to ask out to other police departments to come in. They refused and said they would only show up when a police officer was down, which is extorting an entire city because they won't allow you to have the purge whenever you want to have it. It's crazy to think that those are responses, because if we got to this bad apples are the problem and you just have to stop, you're not stopping those one-off instances.
They're actively stopping you from punishing the bad apple. When you see the bad apple, we try to pluck the bad apple, and it's like the rest of the tree goes to wrap its fucking branches around the apple. Well, then, no, it sounds like we got to burn the whole fucking tree down.
I think when you try to figure out how to fix it, there's no doubt in my mind that it's at the minimum an overhaul of the system. It is the ways this work, because it's not those one police officers. It is the force. It is a force that can act with impunity, because the only ones there to challenge the record of what happened is, if there's not a video of it, then is themselves, their own police reports, their own access to the body cameras that taxpayers paid to try to hold them in check. Either the camera shut off, or even when it is on, they get to check the evidence first. They're the only people who would get to commit a murder and get 4 days to get their story straight before they're even asked about it.
There's no fucking way. There's no way. Like on no planet, at no other job, if I were to clock out of my bar and get home and I've cleared out the register, when they go open tomorrow, do you think that the first thing they gonna do is not hit me up about that? There's no way they'd be like, oh, we'll just wait. He'll be in next Thursday. We'll just wait and ask him about it then. No fucking way. No fucking way. You couldn't. go print some ridiculous shit next time you're at work and see if you don't
I'm gonna try
hear
to
about
avoid that.
see if you don't hear about that shit before you get to bed that night. On what planet can you kill a person and then we go, oh well, according to his boss, we got to wait a few days before we ask him anything about it. That would make sense if we could also reasonably assume that you can't talk to nobody about it. No, they get to go home, get their shit together, call up their partners, figure it out. That's absurd. That's wild. Like, if you were to tell me that those were the parameters of a video game I was playing, I would turn that video game off because my suspension of disbelief doesn't stretch that fucking far.
I believe it was when I was going back to watch 6 Feet Under, and now at this point it's been so long I forget the names of the characters, but
I still have not gotten to that one yet. I know I need to.
But Michael C. Hall, who plays Dexter, he's in 6 Feet Under, and his character is basically a closeted gay man at his family's mortuary, and he ends up dating a black police officer, and eventually that relationship fizzles out. But one moment is the black police officer getting fired because he killed a man during a stop, and I had to stop watching the show at that moment because I'm like, he doesn't get fired. Like, he's just on suspension for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Maybe.
no, well, he's a black cop, so he might have he's a black cop, so he would have actually gotten charged. That's another thing that you will see happen if you look for the police who actually get charged for their crimes. The only ones who get charged, I'm not gonna say the only ones, but by and large, the ones who get charged are officers of color. And also, you'll see the same thing happen if an officer speaks up about their people or tries to correct or reprimand someone. I saw an article recently about an officer who got fired and then charged with obstruction of justice because he stopped one of the officers he was working with from beating the shit out of a dude that was already cuffed. So it's not that good cops don't exist, it's that they do not exist for long. The only good cops either A, got murdered by other cops, or B, work someplace else now because they cannot. There are very, very few that do not. It's a get down or lay down type system. It's just like being in a gang or one of the more hardcore fraternities. If you aren't with it 100%, you can get the fuck out. And it's simple as that.
And, we've gone and talked about this issue, pretty thoroughly without hitting the, exact parts that Dave Chappelle ends up talking about in 846. But, I think part of the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I didn't know what to say when this happened other than, what I mentioned in the opening of kind of what I feel like my role has to be in terms of taking on the burden of white people educating other white people, because it's ridiculous to expect black people to keep trying to educate white people, and it's wasting their time, their energy, their passion, and people get exhausted. And that's, kind of where we're at right now with the pandemic. We were already exhausted when this started, and I think I didn't know what to say coming out of that. I tried to make the right comments in the moment, but I didn't want to be looked at as somebody who was complicit because they were silent. I also didn't want to take up the space. I didn't want to add anything into the conversation when there were so many people much smarter than I talking about this. I wanted to listen too because my learning isn't done. The things that I need to know. I was a history minor at KU, and I didn't know about the Tulsa Massacre. That was I watched the opening scene of Watchmen, and I was like, "This is too crazy." And then, nope, that's a real thing. What in the hell? And, since then, I'm probably a third of the way through Stamped from the Beginning, going through and making sure that, okay, I know what's going on here, and I need to make sure that if I'm going to have those conversations, I have to be educated. There can't be holes in my knowledge, because if so, that's
Having
just going
holes
to
in your
be
knowledge isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's just room to grow. That's room to learn. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing inherently wrong with not knowing.
yes,
The issue is when you're presented with new information or a new idea, to flatly reject it or to try to argue it with either inferior logic or something that's just outright not facts. Like if you don't know, you don't know, and that is a-okay. And being able to acknowledge that you don't know something is as much as important a part of the process as anything else involved. Because how else do you learn if you don't know that you don't know something?
yeah, and for me, it's making sure I know so that when I have to have those conversations, it's not me backtracking to figure out in post after somebody already got away with saying something stupid. I need to make sure I'm ready to combat that as best I can, and it's just one of those things where I also don't want to miss the moment. I don't want us to get to a point where we finally got people listening and they're going to wait it out. When we think about what happens when this pandemic ends and we look away again. And I think that's a conversation the NBA players started to have. They've done an amazing work, pushing for change, and they've had these talks about, sitting out instead of returning for the playoffs, getting stuck in a bubble at Disney World as the streets continue to scream for change. Many of the players, I think Kyrie was one of the first ones to say that publicly in that conversation, and was backed up by many other NBA players that aren't sure what they want to do. From my vantage point of looking at what the possibilities are, it seems like it makes sense that there's kind of a hole in what people are able to do right now. People want to go back and watch sports, and if it's the NBA and they're able to control the message, if the players are able to say, these are the things we need to talk about, this is how it needs to be handled, and there's only going to be 14 teams entering into the playoff, or I guess it's 22 that they're doing their little mini tournament with. That's still 8 teams that have players that can be outside continuing to lead the charge, and the people that are in the playoffs have all eyes on them right now.
I am supremely disappointed. I'm not surprised by the MLB not being as loud as you would want. I mean, they're basically just trafficking child ballers. That's kind of their thing. I'm not worried about them. The NFL and NBA in particular, I am disappointed with, because I mean, not to be like, oh, there's no athletics without black people, but the NBA and NFL cease to exist if you pull black people off the fucking field in the court. There is, you want to watch the NBA with all white dudes? No, nobody wants to watch the NBA. Racists don't even want to watch the NBA with all white dudes.
They're pretty big fans of college basketball.
And which teams do they fucking watch?
One team. With
one and done.
With
all they watch is the one and done teams, the teams that are about to put people into the league anyway. Because if they wanted to watch basketball with talented white people, they would just watch fucking EuroLeague. But my point is the fact that the NBA and the NFL are so slow to act and so tentative when they do move, but then you got NASCAR of all people being like, yeah, y'all can go ahead and get rid of that fucking flag. With one active half-black driver, NASCAR stepped in the right direction, and a league that has been dominated by black bodies as far as the product and like where your money is coming from. When's the last time somebody bought a pro basketball player's jersey that was a white American? I'll wait.
Got me there. White Mamba, Brian Scalabrine, which is just done ironically.
You know what? I'll take it. I'm sure somebody had love for JJ Redick and bought one of his jerseys anyway. I'm sure.
That's true, and he deserves it.
Bulls,
he's fighting the good fight as well. So
exactly, and the Bulls ain't had nobody playing basketball worth of shit. So Kyle Korver sold a couple of jerseys while he was up there. That's about the long and short of it, though, right? Because the sport is, I'm not gonna say it's a black sport, but it is consistently dominated at the highest levels by either black folks, or the white folks who do dominate aren't white folks from here. Like, you'd have seen a whole lot of Steve Nash jerseys going. He's Canadian. You get a whole lot of Dirk jerseys going. He ain't from over here. Like, this is, and to have that be your bread and butter and you not be willing to stand behind your bread and butter is crazy to me. The NFL has its first solid white running back in like fucking 20 years. I'm not going to count Peyton Hillis. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. One trick pony. Look at all these black quarterbacks coming out and doing their thing. They were talking about like Lamar Jackson shouldn't be playing fucking quarterback, but there he is with a league MVP. It's you can't pretend like this isn't where you're getting your money from. So why would you? It just seems like it's bad business to not back them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like it's like if I were to be the king of fucking veganism and pro animal life everything, but also at the same time being like, you know what they should do? They need to build another fucking beef farm around here. Not a dairy farm. No, don't milk them. Slaughter them bastards. I cannot wrap my head around why someone would step on their own dick in that way.
Well, I think the answer is, one, the same reason why NFL and NBA players often sign collective bargaining agreements that put them in terrible positions. It's about leverage, and at the end of the day, once you've worked through the collective bargaining agreement and that's signed, then it's okay. How is our bread buttered? It is the fans that pay to get in the game. And we were talking about the Drew Brees thing 4 years ago. Their fans, there were more people willing to stop watching the game because Colin Kaepernick was kneeling during the anthem. Oh no. Then would stop playing or stop watching because they know that the players will end with CTE. That is what the stats say, and you just keep watching because this is kind of what you've lived with. So at the time, the backing Colin Kaepernick didn't make sense to them. It made sense to say, no, we don't like this and we need to stop this because we want those fans to keep watching us. Now, as the conversation has continued to change, people every day, as you keep telling them, one person says all lives matter, and you explain why that doesn't make sense, why you shouldn't be combative to the phrase Black Lives Matter, and why you shouldn't be combative to the movement Black Lives Matter, because they are out for one thing, to make sure Black Lives Matter. Once you get people to understand that, the person who said all lives matter usually keeps saying it. The people who might have just nodded in agreement over the last 4 years have started to wake up, started to pay attention, and now it's actually against their best interest to keep the status quo. And I'm hoping it's not just the reaction of when everybody has their eyes on it. What happens when we get to the fall, say football actually happens?
That's why the legislation part is so important. The legislation and actually getting rules and regulations in place, because if you don't get that stuff in place, then people will do things temporarily while folks are looking, and as soon as they stop looking, that shit will get rolled back like nothing happened. So that getting those things on paper, etched in stone, you know what I mean? That is going to be, that's when we can chill the fuck out and I can go back to sharing raunchy memes instead of my whole Facebook page just being bliggity black, black, bliggity black, 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 black. Like, and in fairness, my Facebook was pretty whack as fuck anyway. But I had some levity in there. I don't have room for levity now. I can't. It's taken away the ability for me to express me the way that I want to. I can't be the fun, happy-go-lucky guy. I have to effectively be the big scary black man that I've been told I was my whole fucking life anyway. When I'm not. I might be the nicest guy I know. I'm fucking hilarious.
And I think that the conversation turning right now is something that you're right. There has to be change now. It's not enough to say, okay, we're going to fix it by getting a different person in the White House. One, because the other option is not so good. And
two,
because these problems, as much as we've seen the power of having a bad president, there are so many things that have to be done at the state level, at the local level. And if that doesn't happen, if you're not getting the contracts with the police to change, to not build it into their collective bargaining agreement, their union contract that allows them to be their own jury on what's happening, to be the one that stands between holding them accountable. Until you get that to change, it won't matter who the president is.
How the fuck does that make sense? Hey, you fucked this up real bad. Oh shit, let me check on that real quick. Yeah, I did an internal investigation. Turns out wasn't me. No idea what you're talking about. Nigga, what? Where have you ever worked where that would fly? On what planet?
You literally have to be like the son of the boss. So in this case, every police officer is the son of the boss. They all have one father who's given them the ability to do whatever the hell they want at this
I've been the son of the boss. I took a write-up so that he didn't have to have one of his AEs. Look, he didn't want to have his account executive look bad, even though his account executive fucked up. I ate the write-up because I wasn't going to be working there much longer anyway. I was getting ready to go off and go peruse the world and such. But that same point, that conceptually somebody has to hold accountability regardless. So even though he covered his AE's ass, I still had to eat the write-up, which was the appropriate punishment for what happened. Nobody is eating the punishment. The only people that are eating the punishment are the victims. And that is what is so fuckity fucked about it. Dave, what was that thing that Dave said? Shit, lost my train of thought. Like, I think I'm a pretty funny guy. I think you're a pretty funny guy. When we hang out, we can talk about stuff that is not funny in any way, shape, or form, but there will be laughter there just because of, honestly, sometimes the absurdity of some of the shit.
I've nervous laughed like 6 times already during this podcast.
Yeah.
7.
No, I was talking to my dad the other day, right after he had finished watching the 846 special, and we were talking about his older cousin Brenda, who just passed maybe a week before that. And during the middle of what we're talking about, I remember saying out loud to him, "Am I laughing or crying? Find out on next week's episode of Dragon Ball Z." Because it got to a point where obviously there's nothing funny here, but you have to find some light somewhere to keep moving. And that goes back to what Dave was saying. Matt, I think it's was it Killing Him Softly? No, it was the one at the Fillmore where he had that big ass porn stash. But he was like, "Who the fuck wants to hear from Ja Rule? Like,
for
who
what
the
it's
fuck
worth.
gives a shit?" That was for what it's worth. Like, who gives a shit what Ja Rule has to say? And here at this 846, he realizes he is his own Ja Rule here. He just became the butt of his own joke because he's like, people are clamoring and asking for Dave to say something when, one, you look at his work over the history of his career, he's been said something 1,000 fucking times over. So don't come for Dave on that one. And then for two, he understands that the people need to see him specifically because we don't fucking trust nobody. About the only people, the last real fucking prophets these days, it feels like, are the fucking stand-up comics, because they're the only people who have a vested interest in you seeing the truth. Because if you see what they see, then y'all can laugh together. And if y'all can laugh together, this comic has done his job. But if you can't see that same truth that the comic sees, then his jokes fall on deaf ears. That's when people go, oh, this comic's lost his fucking mind. Like when Cat Williams goes into his fucking conspiracy theories and shit. If to the people that are on the same page with him as far as those theories and shit goes, his shit was probably fucking hilarious. But to the rest of us that don't necessarily perceive things the same way that he does, he just sounds like, you know, maybe he hit one too many of the whatevers. And that's also a tricky ground. We were talking before we started about how comics have to play in this ground of, am I playing or am I serious? And the thing about Dave's comedy in particular is that even though he is clearly playing, you can tell that the core of these jokes is dead ass serious. Sprinkle some crack on them. That's a joke, that's hilarious, great bit. However, that they just had 15 dudes in Chicago, 15 individual black dudes, all get exonerated after spending anywhere from 2 to 5 years in prison apiece over a dirty cop literally arresting them for nothing and then planting drugs on them. And if Chicago's courts are letting niggas out of prison, somebody had to fuck up. Like, the veil is getting pulled back. And that's the part that's why people are fighting back so hard on the other side. Because if they have to give up this little bit of space to allow for what we know to be true to exist, then that means that they have to give up so much more space in order for the rest of what's necessary for this to be true to exist. And that's just part of why Dave left in the first fucking place, is because it got to the point where they were basically like, you saying the quiet part real fucking loud right now. So they started trying to cut and bend his show to fit their narrative, and he wasn't down for it. He said, keep your $50 million. I'm going to come back like Drake. Gave him 2 for $40 million. You know what I'm saying?
You know, and part of that also is, you know, Dave looking at kind of the issues with comedians with, you know, the jokes. Are they serious? What was the intent of the joke? And oftentimes on its face value, it might look bad, but if you actually knew the intent, then you know that that's not what a comedian's saying. And that's sort of getting lost in translation with having white kids running around yelling out the punchlines to the Chappelle show, not realizing that you're just adding racism back into society when that never was what Dave was aiming for. And that's kind of
in the from laughing with you to laughing at you.
I feel like in the time that Dave Chappelle has been putting out Netflix specials, it's almost like a completely different setup, a different style. And, you know, I don't mean to go to wrestling, but that's the best way I know how to piece together exactly what's happening, which is that he was a character when he was on stage before. Not like you mentioned, he's trying to get the laughter. He's going for that punchline, but at the same time, there's a seriousness at the core of his joke. But he did have a presentation to it. And now we've seen him be a lot more kind of slow and calculating with the jokes. He is reeling you in before he hits you with the big punchline.
That
And I think
car joke, bruh. The car joke, the LGBT car joke, because he got a lot of flack out of the trans community over that car joke. And like, as one of the bees, I thought the joke was fucking hilarious because heard what he said about us, just sitting in the back seat looking around, going, "Oh fuck everybody in this car," and I was like, I can relate to that. But where what I was hearing from the trans community was that he's being insensitive and this, that, or other. What I saw was his joke literally saying people are insensitive to trans people and are immediately mean and fucking what's the word I'm looking for? Dismissive of whatever their problems are without ever actually taking a listen to what the fuck their problems are. It's like you got the tea sitting over here by the window, like it's hot in here, and then everybody else just turns around, shut the fuck up. That is, if that is not the tea's life to the fucking letter, they can't ask for shit without people going, oh my god, now I gotta hear about this shit again, because that's how people fucking treat it. People treat it like it's some like the concept of a person being transgendered is like cockroaches in their house or something. Like it's gonna flip the genders of all their kids and they're gonna have to sell all their pink blankets for blue ones or some shit like that. When in actuality, all they're doing is trying to live. Like shit, I was talking to myself. I'm hot. Can I not be hot? And their being uncomfortable makes other people uncomfortable simply on the sense that, well, if I can deal with whatever's making me unhappy, then you should have to deal with it yourself. That's how compassion works. That's bitter. That's jaded. That's what shitty people do. I had to deal with this, so you do too. No, I had to deal with this, and I know it sucks real bad. I'm gonna do my best to make sure you don't fucking have to. That's how humanity is supposed to work. That's how compassion is supposed to work. But instead, we get a whole bunch of people mad at Dave Chappelle for, I guess, speaking out of turn. Like, but that's the risk you run when you do that at that level with that big of a voice anyway. And especially if, like I said, he took his route as opposed to like the Jeselnik route where everything is supposed to be a joke. Because if you believe for a second that Jeselnik is out here raping babies and punching wheelchair kids in the back of the fucking face, then he'd be under the jail already. Like he did the fucking on his little show with the fucking Shark Week thing with the dude that got killed by the shark. He brought the dancers out in the fucking shark. That would have buried any comedian that had ever attempted to be taken seriously at any point. And the only thing that he's serious about is these fucking jokes.
He was also very serious about defending sharks. That actually might be the one joke that, for real, he was passionate about.
Hey, that's legit though. Sharks, look, we are more dangerous to sharks than sharks are to us. I'll stand with Anthony on that.
It's true. He also did not plan for that joke.
Defending white dudes.
He did not plan for that joke to be hand delivered to the parents of the deceased from that shark attack. So
at that one, you just got to lean into it at that point. Like, all right, well, fuck, we're here.
All right, so I'll give my little response for Dave, but first, your camera is cutting off the top of your head. So if you want to just tilt up a little bit, move back either way, perfect. So we got to get your pretty face on there. So I think particularly with that LGBTQ in the car joke, that it shows that Dave has put the time in. He has thought about all these things, and he does understand to some degree the dynamics at play. I think that's what makes it even, more. The critics attack more because of how dismissive he is by the end of the joke, the way he finishes, the way that he doubled down on trying. He's like,
yeah, nigga, I get it anyway.
So that's kind of where we get back to, okay, at some point, it's clear that these aren't just jokes. This has to have more meaning. And we could spend another hour talking about whether stand-ups are supposed to only punch up and they can't punch down and this and that. Any older comedian will tell you, no, you punch every direction. And most of the time it'll be
And
uppercuts.
what I would argue is that to insinuate that he's punching down with that joke would be to insinuate that trans people are down compared to where he is as a human. You know what I mean?
I think that's part of his perspective is you can't come at me about this when I'm already dealing with this, which gets into the kind of intersectionality issues that Dave just doesn't want to deal with.
Intersexuality. I got excited. I thought this podcast was about to get funky.
But the intersectionality of the oppressed people that, in his mind, well, we're on the same level, so you can't hold me like accountable for this. Like, I get it. I'm part of it. We should be able to joke amongst ourselves. But at the same time, we've seen where those kind of issues can be that much more destructive for if somebody is black and transgender. They are dealing with it from all sides because they're not getting that ally in a black man who happens to be a very influential comedian who people listen to. They don't just listen for the jokes. They listen for the perspective, the philosophizing that he does on stage. And if that in some way comes at them, there's, I think he mentions in 846 that I wouldn't contradict him on saying that most of the police brutality faces black people and very often black men. But at the same time, the numbers of crimes that are against black transgender individuals is so high.
And the unsolved numbers of those crimes, the sheer number of all unsolved tells you how little people actually care.
Yeah. So
what I mean? No, you got it.
I was just going to say, I think the fact that he has that disconnect and is clearly not just going for this was just kind of tongue in cheek, that is where it becomes a different thing for a comedian. And you can't just hide behind it's a joke. Now, at the same time, that's the power that Dave Chappelle has, because there was true power in the 846 conversation. The way he brought it all around, the same way he does it with a punchline, he did it. It was a punch to the gut. And while there can be those, it's usually a one-off. It's one per special, something terrible he says that the critics attack him for, and that's all they hear. There's so much else there. And what was great about 846 was he distilled it down to just that. His amazing storytelling, his ability, the fact that he, for the most part, is seeing, more than just what we're being told to see. He is a truth teller in that regard, and he can deliver it in a way that will affect you, that I'm still thinking about that special a week later after watching it. And I think that's what upsets people so much when he does come after the trans community, is because he has that power and he's using it against.
It's so important that he acknowledged himself. That is very, very important for people who intend to learn and grow. One, he's very, very clear about his stance as far as how trans people's lives should be lived, and it ain't my fucking business. Live your fucking life. No matter how you want to, you should not be, you shouldn't have to worry about safety or shelter or being in freedom. Like that shit is inherent no matter how you want to live your life. And a thing that's important that he brought up, that he says unabashedly, is that he doesn't understand, but he believes. Like, that's the thing. You don't have to necessarily understand someone else to believe them. And that part is like, that gives so much more room for growth as a whole, because he could easily go, I don't get it, I don't like it, fuck that. And he could be that guy. But instead his stance is, I don't get it, but I fucking believe you. And then he proceeds to tell another quote unquote shitty trans joke. It's like, I mean, fuck it, chop it off. I don't need it. He's like, no, I believe that motherfucker. That's you got you. If a person is willing to, nobody is nobody's just out here volunteering to have as hard of a life as possible. Like being trans is its own fucking burden to bear. Being black is its own burden to bear. Being black and trans at the same time, you might as well have a lynch me sign on your back. Like, and for someone to already have to go through the traumas of being black and queer, and then to go one step further and go, you know what? We're going to go ahead and make the whole transition to deny that person humanity through that struggle just sounds like some hater shit, is the easiest way I can put it. And he knows that, and he acknowledges that. And I think that's like I said, that's one of the most important things, is that I don't think he's even at the top of his game yet. I think he's gonna be like when it's all said and done, he's gonna be a George Carlin type, where that motherfucker's just gonna keep getting funnier till he dies. Like, I don't think Dave ain't gonna shut up till somebody shut him up.
So when you watch a special like 846 where the comedy gets pushed to the side, I think the closest he gets to going pure, this is for the joke of it, is still based in a thing that upsets him very much. Talking about Candace Owen. So when you watch that, do you feel like this has a bigger impact than, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, he's made a career out of talking about police brutality, but when you have somebody who has been the go-to, that in every moment, when you're looking for something to lighten the mood, and for Dave Chappelle to be the first stand-up comedian to have a special made, did it very quickly. This isn't based on any material that he had already built up. This is his raw feelings coming after George Floyd's murder. Do you think this has the chance to have a bigger impact than what his stand-up has done talking about this issue?
So as far as how big of an impact it can make, that depends on the people. Potentially, yes, it could have an earth-shattering impact if enough people listen to it and hear it for what it is. There will always be people that are going to look at it and go, oh, it's Dave Chappelle, and then be like, this isn't funny, and just fuck right off. There are also a bunch of people who enjoy his comedy, and like people that are fans of, there are plenty of racists that are fans of Chappelle Show. He's funny, he's fucking funny. Like, that's simple as that. I think that this is going to be basically like a jumping point for him to be able to be more, or say even more direct than he already is about some of the subjects going forward, because now he's set a precedent. It's not one of those, he's not the athlete you're going to go tell to shut up and dribble, because you know that ain't his game. He is here to talk to you about these things. We're going to laugh along the way, but we have to talk about these things. And it puts him in a different category from the rest of the pack at this point, because the only other people that you expect to get that direct of a feeling from and still expect to get some knee slapping comedy out of are like old heads at this point. Like, you get that out of Lewis Black, you know what I mean? Like, where he's like, all he's talking about is almost purely political shit, but it's also still hilarious. And even if I don't even necessarily agree with everything that he's saying, but I'm laughing my ass off the whole time.
I'm usually impressed that he can keep Mac level volume throughout the entire stand-up bit. That's probably the most
not blow his
part.
fucking voice box out. That dude is something special. That's another one. I feel like when people always ask like, who's your top 5 favorite comics and shit. And for some reason, I never think to put Lewis Black in my top 5, but damn if he ain't hovering right there at like 6 or 7. Like he is just in, day out, every single time you hear from him, it's thoughtful, it is thought provoking. And like I said, even when you don't agree with him, it's at least gonna turn around and go Google some shit just to make sure that you are on the right side of this argument. And that's a thing that Dave does at this day and age at a level that either A, you aren't popular enough to do, or B, you don't believe in yourself enough to go try the shit. But ain't nobody fucking with Dave right now. Like you can try that same lane and it's just gonna get whereas when Dave goes and does it, it's a different thing. Dave is like the Michael Jordan of stand-up comedy right now. Nigga went and retired for a couple years, came back, and is still at the top of his game.
I did want to ask, to get a little bit more in kind of the craft of stand-up, and I've just been amazed by how much different his routine sounds compared to what he was doing prior to, having the Chappelle Show and leaving the Chappelle Show. When he came back on Netflix, it was this very different act that, if you wanted to compare,
the whole goal is different.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy to me to compare it to other really big time stand-ups that stepped away, came back. Probably the best comparison you went for Michael Jordan with going with the sport, but if you even keep it in stand-up, Jerry Seinfeld had the huge show, became rich. Obviously, his views are going to be a lot different when you are living a completely different life than when you started to create your act. You were richer than most people, and you have generational wealth that changes you.
I think Nick Kroll said something about that because he was making reference to that and also bringing up John Mulaney as well, who's one of my favorites. John Mulaney. But he was like, John Mulaney still does jokes like he's like poor or something. Like John Mulaney has more money than I do. And Nick Kroll's balling out here in these streets. He's like, John Mulaney has more money than I do. And he's still it's that feeling that if you were to sit down next to this person, they would feel as awkward as you would. John still exudes that, where when Jerry showed up, he was kind of awkward, and now he's got this cool about him because he knows what he is. And even though John knows who he is, he still has that same like, no, I'm dying. My phone's dying.
No, I was wondering. It was very weird sounds.
Hold up. Damn it, too late. Thing. Like, so Dave, especially after walking away from $50 million, the world looks at Dave differently. And when he came back, even though we knew how much Netflix paid him, the idea of the money itself was kind of like not as important as it normally would be in that situation when you know how much money a person's getting paid to tell you jokes. And that solidified the real. Even if it turns out this is just the greatest long play ever, and Dave Chappelle don't really give a fuck about nobody, and he just bet on himself by not taking that $50 million the first time. Even if that's a long play, the authenticity has been built in at this point. He basically signed his own check at that point.
Yeah, and I think you even add in the story of how the Netflix deal starts. They give him this giant deal. It's 3 specials. 2 of them he just had sitting in his closet. These are ones he had already filmed, and he just hands them over, and 2 out of 3 for this $50 million start with Netflix. Even that, to get that amount of money for one special. It was literally one special at that point because he already filmed the other ones without the idea of getting paid in mind. It was just, he just did it, had it in his back pocket, and it's like, might as well. These are collecting dust. Here you go. Give me my money. I think there's definitely that aspect that keeps him, relatable, but I think it's more about the craft to me. Like I think with Seinfeld, he still his stand-up remains relatable. It relates to everything he told us in the 80s, in the 90s, on a show that lasted a decade. Like,
and some change.
So the problem is he never changed. And when you compare the two, Seinfeld is like, I got rid of my old act. Did you? You got rid of all the jokes, but the act is
still the same.
Chappelle came back, and I don't know how much that had happened before. He'd been doing stand-up for a long time before he gets the Netflix deal. A lot of stuff that I didn't watch in the time between, leaving the Chappelle
like
show.
The shit at the Laugh Factory and whatnot. Yeah.
So it can be more of a progress, but in terms of my mind, and in terms of, I assume, a lot of people who didn't really watch a lot of what he was doing, because they talked about him coming back to Netflix. It was like him coming back out of the wilderness. It was like, what has he been doing in this time? Like, the reclusiveness added to the appeal of watching these Netflix specials, and it's crazy to see
there's no way
jump.
that he didn't see any of the shit that was happening. So he's gonna have something to say when he gets back.
Yeah, and I expected him to come back with the same routine with new jokes talking about what's happening now. I didn't expect him to, be like Seinfeld coming out of, just living under a rock. But I expected him to sound a lot like he did before. And the cadence, the just deepness of his voice is different.
The fact that he doubled in size. The only thing that remains the same from the old Chappelle is that, one, he is a comedian who laughs at his own fucking jokes,
which is sometimes funnier than the joke.
Right. It's one, and he always does that, like, fall back, slap the mic on his fucking knee, and you hear that book. Like, just he cracks himself up, pats the mic on his knee. I can't tell if that is just natural or if that's like a cue he has for his sound guy or something, but it goes all the way back to that fucking Star Search thing. He was doing it then, he still does that now. And there are very, very few comedians that you watch even over 5 or 6 years of their career, they don't keep that same body language. It's, even though the act itself changed, the artist did not. Whereas with the Seinfeld thing, it felt like the act didn't change, but that's not the same Jerry that you were listening to in 1989 or that was on the show in 1994. It's probably closer to the one you saw in the 90s because he was starting to get his money up then. But the Jerry that you see now is that's not the same guy. They live in two different worlds.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like what Seinfeld has done as specials is almost identical. If I throw in one from the 80s versus what he did a couple of years ago, nothing really changed other than the increased number of jokes about millennials and the way technology works. But even then, it's different than like the old comic, the old guy yelling at cloud type thing. He's the old guy yelling at cloud, everything outside of the stand-up. The stand-up is like identical to what it was. When you hear him, what has changed is that relatability is gone when he's talking with people. I think I was listening to the Mark Maron podcast, and Mark Maron is just trying any way to push his buttons. Like, why do you not like to talk about actual issues on stage? What is wrong with you? And Jerry's just going the whole time. He's just like, what's funny is funny. What is there someone else to tell you? What funny is funny. That's not a great Seinfeld impersonation, but I'm trying my best.
Actually, that was not the worst one that I've heard.
But the point is, what you hear whether you're listening to, comedians getting coffee in cars or whatever the actual name of the show is. You know what I'm talking about. All those words. Some of them are right, and some were in the right order.
Whatever.
That you just listen to him, and that is that you see this old, out of touch comedian, but what he does on stage is still out of touch, but it's out of touch in the way that it is not changed in all that time. And I'm amazed by it because it's two completely different ways to still make a lot of money and to keep building on that ridiculous wealth. These are two of the richest comedians in the world, and obviously neither one has lost a step in their game, but it is a completely different product they're bringing. Dave Chappelle's was a lot more risk involved, and not just from the trans joke that he doubled down on. It is the way that he presented himself was much different than what initially got him famous, which is always going to be a risk.
That's bold as fuck in the first place.
Seinfeld is just, I can keep doing this. This is what the routine is, and I just have to change the jokes. And they're both masters of the craft, and it's weird to see kind of the difference, but you can also find that comedians getting coffee in cars with fancy cars sometimes. That show, they have an episode where it is Dave Chappelle, I believe. I don't think I dreamed this. I'm pretty sure they're talking. And it's weird when you see these comedians that seem so different, and that brotherhood of being a comedian, they're on the same page in a way that I could never imagine. You got me in a room with either of those two guys, I'd sound like a fucking idiot trying to think of even questions to ask them.
What's that show? The Green Room. The Green Room with whatever the fuck dude's name is. I forget his name. He's hilarious himself. I think he might be Jewish, actually. But they always bring in, like, it'll be a whole bunch of different comedians for each individual episode. I think I watched I binged like 3 straight seasons of that one day. Just, you got everybody from fucking Dice to Richard Pryor's daughter off in that motherfucker. Like, Bo Burnham popped up. They made him play them songs. Like, and one thing that was consistent the whole time, because there were a couple times where people would say some things that were a little out of pocket. They had Roseanne on once. Kathleen Madigan was wilding the fuck out. But the thing that stayed consistent was that they wouldn't get irritated at a joke if you said something fucked up or something like that. The only way that you would get them irritated would be by stepping on jokes. Like, you can say your racist bullshit or whatever. If it gets a laugh, it gets a laugh. We don't care. We're here to be funny. But if what you're saying is stepping over what we're trying to talk about, then we'll get annoyed with you, tell you to shut the fuck up. I think there was only one episode I saw a dude actually have to get removed, but he wasn't even on the chair. Like, he wasn't even on the panel. He was just one of the people sitting around them in their little crowd area or whatnot. And in fairness, he was kind of hilarious. Everything that came out of his mouth was fucking garbage, but his timing was impeccable. I understand why they had him leave. But the point is, that sanctity of comedy, it's like the last free ground of talking. And I understand why comics are scared for that space itself, because more and more it doesn't matter what the art it was you're trying to portray is. If what you said offends people, then it has to go. And I don't think that is fair. I've always been of the idea that if you don't like a comic, don't listen to the fucking comic. Like, boycott their shows. They weren't. This shit wasn't for you anyway. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, when I meet somebody, oh, that rap music's all blah 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 blah. Well, you don't understand it because they weren't fucking talking to you. Go listen to something else. I don't fucking get country. There's like 8 total country songs across the history of time that I'm like, yeah, no, that's a bop. I don't get it because that ain't my fucking life. That shit wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. All the country that was for me, they killed them niggas and stole their songs already. So I I don't have a horse in that race. You'll never catch me in a debate over who's the greatest country artist of all time, because it's not my fucking table. And I think that's an argument that people are not willing to have with themselves when they take in certain forms of entertainment and media and things of that nature. At the end of the day, you don't have any obligation to listen to none of these motherfuckers. You can sit in an echo chamber if you want to of only stuff that you like. You can choose to challenge yourself by hearing different ideas and shit, or you can go straight off the deep end and just listen to stuff that you know you're not going to like, just so you can hear what the other side's got. But to try to take away someone's ability to speak altogether, that sounds counterintuitive. That sounds like that goes against the purpose of fighting for that First Amendment right in the first fucking place.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference between trying to counter somebody's message in a way that is, don't let them perform, don't do this, do that, and then countering the message in a way that makes sure that when people hear it, you don't walk away just thinking what they said was right. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, is it just for giggles, or is it this serious conversation? Is it
Right.
their
Ask yourself, what
philosophy
are you
showing?
listening to?
And so when you have somebody like, whether it is, Anthony Jeselnik, he's talked about before, where he's like, there are certain jokes that I can see in the audience them enjoying it too much. And it's not, oh, I couldn't believe he pulled that off. It is, yeah, I agree with you. And that moment is when he goes back the other way, because he's like, I'm taking, like, I need to stop this person from thinking that I'm in agreement with them because I'm making fun of them. And there is that kind of, worry, is when people don't understand what they're hearing, or they do or they misinterpret it, and they try to take it and bring it to their ideas that can be very problematic. I think there is a value in critics of a comedian coming out and making sure people know, okay, maybe you laughed at that joke, but hopefully here's the reality of that topic they were discussing. And that is much different than trying to keep them off stage.
Because a lot of the times, the people that are most critical of a joke or a comic in particular are people who already didn't want to hear that joke or didn't want to hear that comic. So you have a skewed perception in the first place. And let's go with Christopher Titus. I think Christopher Titus is fucking hilarious. I also think that a lot of his views are terribly problematic. However, me and my whole feminist ass girlfriend will sit and laugh to one of his whole fucking specials, simply because you can take the jokes for what they are, you can take his ideals for what they are, and then you do with that what you will. It's not like he's like, haha, here's a joke, also go murder all of the women that you can find, domestic violence for the win. And then here's a joke, also, if y'all don't mind lynching a couple niggas while you're at it. And then here's a joke. That's not what this is. Some humor is lowbrow, funny's funny. And again, I have the option of just putting on somebody else. Oh shit, I didn't like that. Turn that off. If I get real up in my feefs and I feel like he said something completely out of line, I could go as far as clipping it and trying to make a statement about that. But even still, you run the risk then of just exposing more people to it that would enjoy it anyway, and then your message gets lost in the fucking wind. It's a delicate ground to try to navigate, because one, it's fucking jokes. Two, they no individual comedian speaks for all of the anybody that they may or may not be representing at a time. Like, I think Dave Chappelle is one of the greatest comics of all time. To say that Dave Chappelle speaks for all black people would be a fucking overstatement. Drew Brees is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. To say that Drew Brees speaks for everyone who is the child of a veteran would be a fucking overstatement, because he doesn't. We know it was a veteran that told Cap to take the knee in the first fucking place. So that entire concept, we look at things from whatever angle we get them at, and oftentimes that first look is biased by what we want to see or what we believe to already be true. It would be helpful for all of us to take a step and look around before we just make a judgment. But unfortunately, we often either A, don't have time to do that, or B, have been worn down by so many things around us that we don't have the energy to do that. I'm sure there's got to be at least a couple of people that I have just disengaged with altogether in the last couple months, simply because I've explained as far as I'm willing to explain, and to go any further here, now I'm just going to start being mean, and I'm definitely not going to accomplish anything. So it's just easier for me to walk away from the situation and let somebody like you do that fucking research for them, because like I said, I explained as far as I was going to explain.
And I've tried to step in and have those conversations as much as I can, but honestly, it's so tough to figure out who just doesn't have the life experience, doesn't have the reading, and is willing to listen once you give it to them, and who isn't, who is simply pretending to listen and really just playing devil's advocate for as long as they can. And
it is not a good year to be the devil's advocate. I'll tell you what, boy. Motherfuckers getting fired for playing devil's advocate out here in the streets.
you got to be careful. I do think, though, one of the things that Chappelle brings up that I think is interesting is the idea, we've mentioned it earlier, the ability to say something wrong. It's like that is just as important. It's not just, okay, we should get a free pass because they're jokes. Even if you're taking this on the level of, this is the philosophy put into joke form, and sometimes that philosophy can be very problematic. These entertainers, these comedians should have the ability to go on stage and work through that idea and see what the response is, see how they feel, and work it out.
They're learning with you.
And
they're learning with you.
I think one of the comedians that does that so well is Bill Burr, who,
oh yes, we've watched him grow up over the last 10 years.
He, while in the stand-up act, it's not even just an overtime from special to special. It is during the special, as he makes these comments. He is the voice of an angry white man who then has to stop and contemplate, okay, was my initial reaction warranted? And he talks through it, and it's amazing how often by the end of the joke you think he just canceled himself, and he's like, oh, actually, this is kind of the problem. This is where, as a white person, I need to figure this shit out, because it's not okay what I just said I felt.
The joke that I thought was going to do Bill Burr in, nobody cared about it actually, but when I was hearing it, I was like, oh shit, buddy, you are playing dangerously right now. Lucky him, the black community was kind of like, we just gonna leave Uncle Kanye over here for now. But when he was talking about Kanye West's ego and the concept of evil in the world, and how everything that is evil is immediately compared to Hitler specifically, and I think he said something like, I thank God that ego landed in a black man. And the crowd was like, and me in my living room, I was like, oh shit, buddy, let's see where this one's going. And his logic was fucking sound. You put this ego in a black man in America, he can only go so far with this ego. And Kanye has gone fucking far with that ego. There's only so many humans that have walked the earth that could have done and said what Kanye has done. How many niggas you know can walk up, snatch a fucking microphone out of 17-year-old Taylor Swift's hand and be like, "I get this back to you in a minute," drunk off Henny at the fucking Grammys? That's not a thing. That's not a thing. Bill goes on to say, if that ego had landed in a white guy, you are talking generations of devastation, multiple continents, body counts as high as you can fucking get. If you put Kanye's ego in a white dude, that is how you get Hitler. Like, that's not. And as he's saying all of this in my head, my first thought is, bruh, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you say that? And then my second thought was, no, real talk, the world is lucky that Kanye's ego ended up in a black dude. Could you imagine if Justin Timberlake had Kanye West's ego? Burn it all down.
Man.
It's over. It's over.
I think the other thing
Imagine
that
if Mark Cuban had Kanye West's ego.
he doesn't. So yeah, I think part of what's amazing about that is I'm trying to think whether that special was before or after Kanye loses his mind, which I think helps kind of soften the blow of like how like awful was this joke. I mean, Kanye's still trying to do the damage that Bill Burr talks about isn't able to happen. That ego is pretty huge, and Kanye
mid meltdown.
Yeah, okay. So it's good timing on his part because otherwise it might not have worked as well as it did. But it's also, he starts from a place of, okay, how can I make a joke that's saying this is the benefits of racism? And it starts from a place that it's like, there's no way you're getting yourself out of this hole. And comedians do this a lot.
Right.
It's how can I pull this off in a way that actually is funny? Doesn't make me look like this awful person.
The worst.
And that's the kind of the skill. That's the thing that there is only a handful of guys who are that good. Bill Burr is one of them, and Dave Chappelle's another.
What separates Bill from the rest of the pack around him as well is that most comedians could not have pulled that joke off. There's no fucking way. Bill Burr has what I call the Gary Owen benefit. And that
except Gary Owen's views are extra problematic, and he doesn't realize it. He thinks he gets the pass for it, and it's like, you should be careful, Gary. You're lucky nobody actually knows who you are right now.
I would invite Bill to the barbecue before I invited Gary. Gary seems like that try-hard guy. Like, oh, you gonna push your tongue out every time you say words like us, aren't you? Whereas Bill is just like, no, I didn't want to be here. She fucking dragged me here. But potato salad's fucking delicious. Thanks for leaving the raisins out.
Bill's stock goes up throughout the barbecue. Like they got the inverse relationship.
Yep. Gary would show up and everybody would be excited. And by the time he got ready to leave, they'd be like, thank fucking God Gary is getting the fuck out of here. Bill would show up and they'd be like, is that a cop? And then by the time Bill got ready to leave, he'd be wearing fucking Uncle Tevin's goddamn gaiters because they just love Bill so much that, we can't let you walk around here with my niece with them shoes on. Come on now. Like, it's completely different worlds. And I think part of that is that Bill does make an active effort to be anti-racist. You can see that. Whereas Gary makes an active effort to fit in. Bill don't give a shit if he fits in. Bill doesn't want to be here. Bill doesn't want to fit in with anybody. Fuck you. He would rather, if fitting in is what is necessary to get shit done, Bill will go the fuck home. and that is A-okay. Like, one of the things I love about Bill is that he he has managed to, he's like Wayne from Letterkenny. He ain't gave up none of his masculinity or none of his whiteness and still manages to not be a toxic piece of garbage. So clearly it's possible. Also, Wayne from Letterkenny is like the shit. He's like, it's like Stone Cold Steve Austin, where as a kid I would have just assumed that Stone Cold said nigger for fun. But as you grow up and start to see who he actually is as a human being, Texas Rattlesnake will fucking Stone Cold stun your ass right off this motherfucking pickup truck if he catch you being shitty. And that's a beautiful thing. And it also goes to show that, surprised that I would feel this way. You can't judge a book by its fucking cover. And another thing, when you're in a position of having a platform, you know that everything that you say and do is under a fucking microscope. So if you're going to do something, you might as well go fucking hard, because we're going to hear about it regardless. And Black Twitter is unyielding.
I think Twitter in general is very unyielding, and I think one of the last things.
Oh, did you say they did to Karen? Did you see what they did to Karen? Hold on. Did you see what they did to Central Park Karen?
I did not. What happened?
They put this bitch whole life out in the streets, bro. So I forget which newspaper it was, but it's a national publication, like Washington Post or some shit like that. Apparently, this bitch was having an affair with some dude who was married. Let him borrow $60,000 so that he could finish his divorce proceedings. And instead of being with her, he went to go be with this other broad that he got pregnant. Wife was pregnant also. So he had wife, and then Central Park Karen was a side chick, and then he had other side chick. And then when they finally tracked dude down to get an interview, he was like, yeah, I borrowed $60,000 from her, but we weren't in a relationship or nothing. She just was stalking me. And when I tell you that this was I didn't see the thread itself on Twitter. I saw it on Facebook. So it's like a 19 image fucking post of just people roasting her ass. And honestly, at first I was upset that she didn't get charged with anything. Like, isn't it illegal to call the 911 number and tell them something that isn't like,
yeah.
that's gotta be against.
There's gotta be a charge for that.
There's gotta be a charge for that, right? Like, I mean, if she was black, she'd have got resisting arrest and obstruction of justice, even though, she wasn't under arrest. But the point is the fact that she got just, oh, don't do that, and everybody went on about their day, was a little upsetting to me. And then when this rolled out, I was like, oh no, this is fine. Just keep doing this.
There's got to be justice somewhere, and sometimes it's only
Straight up.
Twitter threads, and I don't promote doxing, but occasionally it works.
Truth be told, I am a huge fan of doxing, as long as the appropriate research is done first. Again, kind of like with comics, I feel similar with the internet, and these message boards and timelines and shit. Like, speak your piece or whatever, but be aware of who can see what the fuck you're saying. Don't your First Amendment right ends where the next person effectively begins. So if logically it's been illegal or not illegal, but you can get fired for wearing certain fucking hairstyles for the last fuck ever, and the wave is moving away from that, why would you think making a Facebook post that says, hey, let's hang, I've got a game, hang this one, and it's a picture of a fucking 12-year-old kid. Yes, literally, this is the thing that I saw on my feed today. like, you can't expect that nobody is going to take issue with that. I don't believe for a second that most of these companies actually give a shit about our black asses. However, I do know that they give a shit about their money and they know where their fucking bread is buttered. So if you work for one of these companies and you look like a liability to the company, the same way that the dreads look like a liability, your racism looks like a liability, expect to get fucking fired. These are the same people that were telling their kids to be careful what they post on the internet. Well, take your own advice.
All right, I guess I should have been more clear with the doxing. It's just in terms of publishing the details of where people live, their phone numbers, and this and that. They have to have done something horribly wrong, and then even then, I feel like there's better avenues. If you just go through somebody's Facebook and social media, or even just their history, and find things that they've done wrong that have brought to light, I don't care if that's brought up. That's just the stuff you did wrong being held against you. We could argue all day about what the statute of limitations are on your dumb post, but also you've had a long time. Facebook gives you memories now. I've had a few.
It'll remind you every year.
I've had a few things I've had to delete. Nothing is like so awful, but there's also, it's like, this is just dumb and I don't want to still be there. And you delete it. You have the ability. There's nobody that's going to surprise you with, I found your 8-year-old racist tweets that you should have never posted in the first place. If you didn't want to get in trouble for it, should be gone.
And see where I go with where I say, because I understand what you mean by doxing. What I mean by the proper research is, like, if you see a thing that's posted that is shitty, okay, is there a pattern of shittiness? Is this shittiness being taken in the proper context? You know what I mean? Because they're like, for example, I'm in a couple of different meme groups where you'll see all kinds of sideways ass jokes and shit that are not, they are not intended to be harmful, because they were, it's almost as if me just being in my room and going, you know what, I'm gonna go fuck Mac up because I think he said nigger in his room to himself. That's supposed to be a person's little box where they can go do their fucking thing. If that's off kilter, then that's off kilter. If your lifestyle shows that you are the type of person that is there, like, particularly with these business owners, in, like, especially, you have, one, not only an obligation to your business, but two, an obligation to your community to not be shitty. And if you're going to be, then why should the people who live here trust you with their community? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
the same reason you see motherfuckers get ran out of downtown Lawrence, left in fucking. What happened with Grinders? They came down, they were cool for a second, and then what the owner do? Opened up his fucking mouth and was like, "Oh, President Trump, you should come visit us here." And then 4 months later, that ass is gone.
I also think he said something along the lines of just, Lawrence community. So even before that came up, he was already saying that there was just this kind of didn't like outsiders, this Lawrence mentality. So he'd already attacked the people who he expects to come to his business. Then the Trump thing, and then also their food wasn't good. Just gonna say, I don't know what it's like in KC, but the one that was here in Lawrence wasn't working. They had
the novelty of the way too spicy wing, but we live in the age of Amazon, and I make better wings than them anyway, so I can make a way too spicy wing on my fucking.
They were just throwing cheese whiz on stuff. Like, I can do that myself, and I can get Tostitos cheese instead of cheese whiz. Why are you getting the worst version of liquid cheese in a jar? What is wrong with you people?
Pathetic.
Couldn't believe it.
They don't want no money.
But I think the thing you bring up about businesses is also important, because it's this sort of like timeline of like what people used to say versus what they're saying now. There is a little bit of worry in terms of trying to hold people accountable and like talking like they're hypocrites because they change opinion. We want people to learn.
The point is to change opinion. That's the whole goal.
But also, if you had a opinion that seemed problematic, if you are the NFL, for instance, and you are still blackballing Colin Kaepernick, I'm not going to buy your line of bullshit when you jump in and have this half-assed apology. And that's kind of the thing, is it's the context. I'm not going to say you can't make up for whatever position you held previously. Kind of depends on how bad the position was. You got to do a little bit of work. And in this case, there's a lot of brands that want to just pretend they did the work and aren't really doing it.
That's a tale as old as time, though. They do this shit. They do this shit every year during Pride Month, like they give a fuck about the LGBTQ community. No, they give a fuck about their dollars. They do this shit every February, and now because it's the reason for the season, we gonna be seeing all pro-black everything all fucking summer. And like you brought up earlier, it's a question of, is this going to be treated as a fad, or is this something that's actually going to stick? And that's where that legislation comes into play. Vote locally, vote at the state level, vote at the fucking national level, because the average age of all the motherfuckers writing these laws is like 60, which means that these laws will be in play until after these motherfuckers are dead anyway, before they even come up for a vote again half the time. So they're not doing this for us as a people. They're doing it for the people that are paying them to make sure that their families are good. That's how that generational wealth works. And they instill these ideals in their kids. And it was one of homegirl's friends was having a conversation with her dad, because her whole family's conservative, like super duper staunch conservative, and she's like the definition of a bleeding heart liberal. And her pops just goes, "You'll understand when you're older." Fast forward 10 fucking years, and now she is one of them, and her little sister is staring at her all the time like, what the fuck happened to you? Like, and at the end of the day, what broke her, what changed her view to their view, is just money. Simple as that. It's just money. Even though all of the policies and shit go completely against the fabric of her being, they go against her own wellness, her own autonomy for herself, her ability to make any decisions for herself, out the window, because money.
I wish that wasn't the case. I wish people, could stick with their convictions, which is probably why the warped, crazy tax rates, they make sure that the moment you're almost getting out of pure poverty, it's like, let's hit this one with just enough tax that it seems like, man, the moment you make money, that's when the government hits you. And it's like,
it's wild. I'll show
you how it really works.
There's a little shitty little chunk of the tax bracket you see a lot in the restaurant industry, where you have people who are incredible servers or bartenders that are making hella cash money, and they get approached to become a manager at a salary position. They take that salary position, and then after taxes come out, they end up making less money than they would have in the first place, with twice the responsibility. And then people wonder why nobody wants that job. Why would I take less money to work harder in the same fucking building? On what planet? Where does that make sense?
You have to get to the point where your body is broken down and you're not going to be able to put in the same type of work. And you just have to be like, okay, I have no other upward mobility, but I need something that's going to pay me a salary per year, not live off the tips. And that is best case scenario. And if that is best case scenario, we're all screwed. That's the the only way to think about it.
That
So I do want to circle back around. I have two things to hit as we get to the end here. I feel like we need to talk about a few of Chappelle's jokes for the different Netflix specials, just kind of what are some of the best jokes. But even before that, I do want to hit back on 846 again. And I was just thinking about one of the, really powerful aspects is talking about the time, talking about how much we kind of have this idea in our head that, okay, civil rights a long time ago, slavery a long time ago, and all of it, Dave Chappelle is able to tell in this very impactful story of family members that, live through these things, that when you're talking about the, impact of being oppressed, and even if you are a crazy white person that doesn't see the oppression that still exists, even for you to think that it's been fixed in that time frame. We're talking about people, being servers. We're talking about people who can't make enough money to survive. The generational wealth that is there, where you even have the option of finally getting a good job, and you're like, nah, I don't need to care about social issues anymore. I need to get into the right tax bracket. There's a lot of people who don't even get the opportunity to make that decision because of the way this country is structured, the way that at the time when
that part, that's not politics anymore. That's morality. That's civil rights. And people keep treating it like it's politics. Like, black bodies are not currency anymore. As much as we, especially with sports and entertainment, treat them like they are, black bodies are not currency. And more you start seeing black autonomy, and that is terrifying as fuck to the top end. You've seen how they felt about it. They literally, our government carpet bombed, flew planes over and blew that shit up themselves. If that ain't the wildest shit, I could not imagine the US government blowing up its own fucking people with its, just for the monetary reasons. They don't like just wasting the payload, not if they can get some oil out of it or something. And then I was reading up recently on where Central Park is now, Seneca Village. What used to be Seneca Village. There's almost no record of those people because they got murdered and kicked out and erased. There's nothing there. Now it's just a pretty little park that used to be people's homes. There's a whole ass cemetery that somebody's kids are gonna be playing on at fucking 7:00 in the morning tomorrow. Like, ain't nothing happened.
Yeah, when you think about the policies that were in effect coming out of the civil rights movement, where supposedly you're supposed to get to equality and white people can find one Martin Luther King quote that works for them and then not read the rest of it. The policies that went in place are the ones that have created a gap in wealth that you can't overcome, you won't overcome. And when you add in the police being the battering ram into black communities, there's really no time frame of, okay, here's when you build, here's when you fix the issues, here's where you try to get past this, because it's you said that black bodies aren't currency anymore, except in the prison industrial complex they still are. They are still the main way of keeping people in for-profit prisons working for 17 cents an hour. And the fact that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, chattel slavery still exists in that form. There are so many things that have to be fixed and these are things that should have been fixed 70 years ago. We are now in 2020, and we can't stop the police from killing people in the street. That is the extreme thing that we can see on video.
In their own fucking beds.
And
Breonna Taylor, at that, again, a no-knock warrant, which I've said time and time again, even before this, the concept of a no-knock warrant makes no sense. There is, if you need a no-knock warrant, you have to, you know where this person is. If you're sure that this person is here to the degree that you can no-knock warrant, wait your ass outside. They got to leave eventually. And to have your system so sideways that you can have the person that you were looking for already in custody, and we still get the green light to battering ram this door down. Whoever made that call in the first place to say, hit the door, that person needs to go to jail. Whoever opened fire before announcing themselves, whoever hit the door before announcing themselves, that person needs to go to jail. Simple as that. There's no logical way to explain why. I mean, this shit is, and as far as the, defending cops, that's a first responder they murdered. They murdered a first responder in her own goddamn home, minding her own motherfucking business, and then tried to charge her boyfriend for doing exactly what any legal gun owner is supposed to do. Fuck you thought I bought this shit for? Sit on the mantelpiece? No, absolutely not. And they're all home right now. They're kicking it. They are with their families. Hopefully they're nervous. Hopefully they're sweating, and they should be. And I keep seeing more and more of this outpour from people going, oh, well, cops have a hard job too. That is true. It's a job, though. It's a job that they volunteered for. They went to go to that job. They go to work for that job. I can't clock out of being black when we're done with this podcast. There's no way around that. And the simple fact that 90% of the shit that the cops do shouldn't be their fucking job in the first place. It's people with psychology degrees that can't find fucking work. You know why? Because every time they should be getting called, a cop is getting called to. How the fuck you think you end up with this social worker getting shot with his hands literally up, trying to explain to the cops, this is my patient, that's a toy fire truck? What kind of training are you doing that your officer can't discern a toy fire truck from a fucking firearm? And they're right in front of the institution. So clearly they know that this is a person of the institution. The social worker has identified themselves. How does this dude get shot? How do you shoot him anyway? If you fear for your life so hardcore in that situation, and again, that's another one of them long ass videos that we watched. That was like a 15-minute video. You still nervous? How are you still nervous? I've had stickier fucking weed deals that didn't go that. What? I've literally so you know where Ferguson shit went down. The Canfield apartments, all that. I used to run in there all the fucking time to go grab some weed, record some music, go bullshit with the homies, whatever the fuck. And even in a room full of people who don't trust each other and are armed, I walked out of there with my life every single time. The only time I was ever nervous leaving that place was if there was a cop involved. And part of the way that Ferguson was able to basically keep their thumb over the top of that community is shitty little things they get you for a parking ticket. This is a fun one. Got a buddy lives right on like a couple houses up from the corner. There's a no parking sign just on the other side of a tree that Ferguson itself has allowed to grow so that its branches damn near touch the ground, right? But there's a no parking sign just on the other side of it that is impossible to see unless you approach from the side that the no parking sign wouldn't matter to you anyway from. They hit you with a parking ticket there, right? But they write the parking ticket. They never actually put the parking ticket on the car. This isn't like a perspective or like a theoretical thing. This is literally what happened to me personally. Park the car. A couple weeks go by. My dad gets a letter in the mail because I'd borrowed his car. Dad gets a letter in the mail saying that he's got a summons to go to court for an unpaid parking ticket. His court date was a week before that. So one, you drop a parking ticket with a court date of 1 week from the moment that you put the parking ticket. People have lives. That's just fucked. That's not going to work. Not for a parking ticket. Two, the price on the parking ticket was $250 for a parking ticket on a residential street. Three, we get up to court. They have no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Going about our day. 2 weeks later, another letter in the mail. Not only is it a $250 parking ticket, there is a $100 failure to appear fee and a bench warrant out for his arrest. So now we have to go back into the courthouse, pray that we don't get arrested on the way in, because if you get pulled over by the cops and they see the bench warrant, there's no way you could just be like, oh, I'm on my way to the courthouse right now. No, you get snatched the fuck out the car. You know my brother. I watched my brother get arrested carrying groceries into his apartment in St. Anne, which is another one of the suburb offshoots of St. Louis. And it is purely systemic. Again, a parking ticket. How's he have a bench warrant if he just got the parking ticket a week and a half ago? Because they set the date for 4 days after he got the ticket. Also, he didn't get the ticket in the mail until after the court date was already supposed to happen. This is no accident. And then they bury you in just these little dink and doink, $250 here, $300 there, $250 here, $300 there. Now all of a sudden you owe the court enough money that they can just snatch you up, throw you in jail because you owe the city $3,000 for whatever the fuck. And now that they have you in jail, yeah, maybe you only stay for a couple nights the first time. Next time they see you under any circumstances, and the thing about the cops is that they don't live in the neighborhood, but they work the beat often enough that they get to recognizing everyone's faces. So they'll just see you and be like, oh, I know that person, easy collar. It's easy money. It's easy money. And then they put them in this position where they train them to believe that we are some flavor of animal or evil or some shit like that. Stick them in there and put a quota on them so that they have to get a certain number of us, which means that if they aren't creating the animosity themselves, they already have a perceived idea of animosity. Now they have to go create extra animosity, because it's not, hey, you need to stop so much percentage of this thing from happening. It's, we need to see this many tickets for this and this many tickets for that. They put you in a hole, snatch you up for literally anything. Now you have extra debt because you got court fees, you got to pay for a lawyer, you got to pay for bond, and if you don't bond out, guess what? You're going to lose your job, because who the fuck gives a shit about an employee that just went and got themselves arrested on some dumb shit? Now, you can't afford to do this thing. You get back out, and you're doing your best. It's a vicious cycle, and it's how they intentionally keep people back in jail. They do their best to have you with a record before you can graduate high school. And that is, I promised the truth, the whole fucking truth. I didn't believe my dad when I was a little kid because I was like, oh no, not me. I'm the nice guy. All my friends say I sound like I'm white. That shit ain't never protected me from nothing. My charisma itself might have talked me out of a ticket, but that had less to do with my charisma and more to do with the fact that I still had my fucking Air Force shit on my plates. Like it is wholly unfair intentionally. And the problem is that people want to make it fair, and fair just ain't profitable. Equitable ain't profitable.
It's crazy to think that you'd even, need to have charisma or Air Force plates to get you out of this, situation where an officer is just trying to, add up another ticket, another piece of the quota. And it's, this you're talking about in Ferguson, but this is in every major city across the country, even in the smaller areas. I know even some place like Lawrence likes to believe it is immune from it, but it is not. It is
not at all.
It is.
They shot a nigga downtown just a couple years ago.
And, that one, it's crazy to think when you have somebody who, made a egregious error, is fired from the police force as quick as she was. That is, in this case, the best case scenario. That is the closest you can get to justice for a situation where a man is shot over a seatbelt violation.
And are there any other circumstances, if I didn't like what you were doing and it frustrated me to the point where I shot you, I have to go to jail?
It's crazy to think that in those extreme circumstances, we can't get that worked out at this point. We are still fighting that every day. That is why these people, you have so many individuals that have shown up to protest in these cities across the country. You have that goal of simply stopping the most extreme injustice. And there are still so many other pieces to the puzzle that I'm glad we had this podcast to talk about. I know the game plan was to talk about Chappelle specifically and go in that deep dive, but obviously there was a lot of stuff we wanted to discuss, and we made sure to talk about that because I want that conversation to be had rather than just how do we stop the most extreme. No, we need to stop every bit of it. We need to fix the system entirely, and going after a handful of cops that need to be charged with murder and need to be convicted, that is one step. There are so many more that need to be had.
Tip of the
And
iceberg.
if we're not even having the conversation, I don't know how we're going to get there. And so I'm glad
that's just what we see happening in the streets too. Like I said, Breonna Taylor got killed in her house. Sandra Bland got killed at the fucking station. Still, at this point, I'm starting to wonder if we ever will see justice for that. I don't even know if they're going to open that back up, which is fucking nuts.
Well, we can't have time for the ones where the video went out when we can't even find the ones where we know what happened. We know what happened to Breonna Taylor. And if we can't get justice in that case, there are so many more cases that it's hard to even imagine us getting there. But we have to keep pushing. We have to make it happen. And so I'm glad you came on to talk with me today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me every time.
We're definitely going to have to, find some more. I love talking about stand-up. So, once we can, get this society moving to where it needs to, we can start going back. You can go back to your quote-unquote shit posting. We can go back to watching some stand-up that, in this case, knew I had to talk about 846. Knew it was not a stand-up comedy special, but it was a special that.
It was a stand-up special. It was definitely special. It was not comedy, but like I said, I mean, there's laughter to be had there. But again,
definitely what we needed right now.
You have a conversation with Dave.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that a few days after George Floyd was murdered, I was having a podcast talking about the show Dave, and then now I had to talk about the Dave that is talking about these issues, and the tone shifted. But honestly, it's hard to imagine that's where our tone was because, Ahmaud Arbery, that was in February. That was before we even got to this pandemic. And I think the saddest stat I've heard is from DeRay McKesson talking about how in the time frame where we've all been inside, we've been trying to keep ourselves safe. You've seen the murder rates in the major cities basically be zero. Everybody is inside. It's the first time we've ever seen it happen. The rates of people dying at the hands of the police stayed exactly the same during the pandemic. And if that's not a stat good enough to get you to say we have to make change now, I really don't know what is.
Straight up.
So
I love you, Mac.
This is a conversation we're going to keep happening, but I'm glad we had it. I'm glad everybody who tuned in to watch and listen to us on the Q Crew on the Tell Me More podcast.
Q Crew.
Keep the fight going, folks.
Black Lives Matter. Happy Juneteenth.